Until a certain time, there were no living organisms on Earth that ate other animals. But after the division into conditional herbivores and carnivores, an endless arms race began. Predators grew teeth and claws, and their potential victims acquired armor and other means of protection. With today's video, we open a series of videos about the main confrontations of various geological eras. And we'll begin our story with the battles of animals of the Permian period. If you want to be the first to know about the release of new videos on the Dinosaur Age channel, we advise you to subscribe to it. We also encourage all our viewers to more actively express their opinions about our work in the comments, and mark the videos you like with likes. These actions not only help promote our videos, but also allow as many people as possible to see them. The Permian period lasted from about 298 to 252 million years ago. Shortly before its beginning, the two giant continents of Laurasia and Gondwana merged into a single Pangaea. This supercontinent stretched almost from pole to pole and was washed by the Panthalassa Ocean, which occupied about 70% of the entire surface of our planet. At the junction of the Carboniferous and Permian periods, the climate on the planet became much colder. Snow caps began to form at the poles, and if in the Carboniferous, mainly heat-loving amphibians prevailed, then in the Permian period, they had to make room significantly. The so-called therapsids, something between reptiles and mammals, came to the leading positions on land. It's quite difficult to talk about real battles between animals of that time. Something similar to a serious confrontation between carnivores and herbivores appeared closer to the end of the Paleozoic Era, and then mainly on land, the era was then dominated exclusively by insects, and the seas were inhabited by various species of primitive fish, as well as corals, sponges, and mollusks. The inhabitants of the land were very slow. Their battles were long and unhurried. The development of various qualities that strengthened the confrontation between predators and herbivores was prevented by another mass extinction. Moreover, the Permian extinction was the largest in the entire history of life on our planet. But still, some confrontations that took place in different elements deserve a separate mention in our video. Truly large flying creatures had not yet appeared in the Permian period. Therefore, it's difficult to come up with a plot for a dramatic and harsh confrontation in this element. But pioneers in this area first appeared among the Permian reptiles. We're talking about representatives of the Waigaltiorid family. These small animals lived almost all over the world. They cannot yet fly fully, but had already mastered gliding well. It's believed that they came to this method of moving in space due to their habitats. The Permian period is characterized by the presence of forests with tall trees. Waigaltosauruses, which fed on insects, acquired an extremely unusual adaptation for the convenience of hunting their prey. They used leathery membranes on the sides of their bodies as wings for gliding flight. The basis for such wings were hollow, bony processes, sometimes called false ribs. Fossils associated with different species of this family are found from Madagascar to central Russia. It's difficult to say which types of insects were the main prey of the Waigaltosauruses, but it's safe to say that insects emerged victorious from this confrontation. The descendants of many of them still inhabit our planet today, but the hovering reptiles of this type completely disappeared in the Triassic period of the Mesozoic era. Among the most famous flying insects of the Permian period, scorpion flies stand out. Today, science knows more than 760 species of these insects, and about 370 of them are fossils. One of the earliest species of these flies with a sting like a scorpion was found in the Permian deposits. Also, until recently, It was believed that the beetles of the Permian period were much more primitive than they are now. Most of the representatives of this class of insects were actually very different from the beetles we're used to. They lived mainly in the forest litter and bark of coniferous trees. They had elytra that were not completely hardened and were covered with characteristic tubercles. But in 2017, a new species of beetle was described in Australia, called Ponemorynchia, or Ponemorynchia belmonhensis. Australian scientists have named a new genus, as well as a family of beetles, in honor of the Russian paleoentomologist Alexander Georgievich Ponomarenko. Compared to other beetles over 300 million years old, it looks very progressive. Its body length didn't exceed 1.5 centimeters. The elytra of this beetle are already completely hard. There are also thread-like antennae. Its body is completely smooth, and its thoracic segments are almost identical to similar parts of the body of modern beetles. But at the same time, some features of its structure remain primitive. This did not allow researchers to classify Ponemorynchia to any of the modern suborders. It's believed that this beetle owes this body structure to a change in its lifestyle. It began to develop more open spaces, getting out from under the cover of tree bark. At the same time, these insects continued to live mainly on trees. The main inhabitants of the Permian seas were mollusks, sponges, and corals. In freshwater bodies, there were still sea scorpions that had given up their leading positions. But the most interesting for us are the primitive fish of that time. Among invertebrates, it's rather difficult to talk about any serious competition. But in the seas and oceans of the Permian period, there were two main groups of cephalopods, ammonites and nautiluses. These creatures differed in structure and lifestyle, but only nautiluses have survived to our time. Ammonites died out at the border of the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods along with dinosaurs. Oddly enough, ammonites were more developed from an evolutionary point of view. They appeared earlier and were more diverse. Complex shells with curved partitions, a progressive muscular system, and other adaptations made ammonites the dominant group of cephalopods of their time. Among the deposits of the Paleozoic and Mesozoic, their shells with a diameter of more than 1 meter are found. But nautiluses had one important difference. They hatched from the egg with shells measuring from 1.5 to 2.5 centimeters, whereas newborn ammonites were about 10 times smaller. Young nautiluses could immediately feed on the same food as adults: fish, crustaceans, and carrion. And ammonites lived in the surface layers of water for the first time in their lives and fed on plankton. And they themselves led the life of plankton. Climate change caused by the fall of a giant asteroid caused the extinction of the main food of ammonites and the mollusks themselves. Since the Devonian period, a large number of species of cartilaginous fish lived in the seas and freshwater bodies, the ancestors of modern sharks, rays, and chimeras. They were divided into two groups, Tinacanthus and Xenacanthes. It's believed that real sharks originated from Tinacanthus, but in the Permian period, they did not much resemble the formidable predators of modern seas and oceans. Fossilized remains of these predominantly predatory fish are found in deposits aged 407 to 201 million years. They grew up to 6 meters in length. It's interesting that the teeth of the Tinacanthus were located not only in the mouth, but also outside the oral cavity. In general, not much is known about them. It's safe to say that they were widespread. Most likely during the hunt, they first rammed their prey, and then tore it apart with their teeth. Xenacanthes were much smaller. They did not grow more than 2 meters, and lived mainly in freshwater bodies. Their distinctive feature was a dorsal spine located in the back of the head. Some scientists suggest that it could be poisonous. Xenacanthes died out only at the end of the Triassic period. Most likely, it was the fish from this group that served as the main food for early pelycosaurs, such as Dimetrodon. The most famous fish of the Permian period is undoubtedly Helicoprion. This group of fish, similar in appearance to sharks, were distinguished by a unique structure of the lower jaw. It had a spiral shape and most likely served to saw the shells of ammonites and other cephalopods. Also, among the inhabitants of the reservoirs of the Permian period, one can distinguish such a group of fish as acanthodians. These ancestors of bony fish lived almost all over the world. Their main distinguishing feature was the presence of a large number of fins. Scientists count 6 to 7 pairs in some of them. In the process of evolution, some of the fins turned into sharp spines. Among the acanthodians, there were both active predators and lovers of plankton or plant food. Undoubtedly, the most important aquatic species for us of that time can be considered lobe-finned fish. After all, it was the representatives of this group that earlier emerged from the aquatic environment, and through a long evolutionary chain, essentially became our ancestors. Today, the only representatives of this group live in the seas, coelacanths. But it's time to move to land. Here, by the end of the Permian period, the arms race was in full swing. If the early land synapsids, pelycosaurs, were more likely reptiles, then the later and more developed therapsids were in many ways similar to modern mammals. These animals are distinguished by a dorsal sail, which probably served for thermoregulation. All pelycosaurs known today were predators. They hunted smaller animals and fish. A typical representative of this group of synapsids was Dimetrodon. Previously, scientists classified it as a reptile, but later it turned out that Dimetrodon, like other pelycosaurs, are very different from them. Although there are quite a few similar features in the appearance of these groups of animals, Dimetrodon lived in Germany, the USA, and possibly Canada, Russia, and South America. They grew up to 2.5 to 4 meters in length and up to 2 meters in height. These animals weighed from 200 to 250 kilograms. Different species of Dimetrodon had different types of teeth depending on their size and lifestyle. Some had small, sharp teeth adapted for catching fish, while others had teeth reminiscent of sharks. There are currently 20 known species of Dimetrodon. Initially, it was assumed that these animals moved like modern lizards, but later, fossilized tracks were discovered indicating that their legs were straighter when walking. Towards the end of the period, the division of synapsids and the therapsids that separated from them became more pronounced. The most developed group of predators were Gorgonopsians. This large group included animals of different sizes, from 1.5 to 4 meters. All of them were saber-toothed and possibly pack animals. Among the herbivores, the most well-known species to the general public are Estemanosikians, Lystrosaurus, and Paraeosaurs. Estemanosikians were large therapsids, similar to a hippopotamus. The body length of these herbivorous giants could reach 4 meters. They were distinguished by a skull with large growths, which gave the animal's head a very weird shape. Perhaps these growths served to attract the opposite sex or were useful in battles for females. The smaller Lystrosaurus also belonged to therapsids. They were able to survive the Great Permian extinction and disappeared only in the Triassic period. Their height did not exceed 40 centimeters, and in length they grew up to 2 to 2.5 meters. But Paraeosaurs were real, albeit primitive reptiles. Depending on the species, they could grow up to 2.5 to 4 meters in length and weigh up to 700 kilograms. In the deposits, due to which the period was called Permian, there are remains of such a representative of Paraeosaurs as Scutosaurs. We've chosen it to clearly illustrate the battles between herbivores and carnivores of that time. The Scutosaurus could grow up to 3.5 meters. Their body in the most vulnerable places was protected by bony growths. They were short and stocky. The skull of the Scutosaurus was powerful and wide. Judging by the reconstructions, it resembled slow hippos and led a similar lifestyle. At the same time and in the same territory lived one of the most famous gorgonopsians, Innistronyavia. It's considered the first giant land predator in the history of the planet. The body length of Innistronyavia reached 3.5 meters and the height 120 centimeters. The narrow, elongated skull, up to 60 centimeters long, ended in a mouth with huge fangs. It's also possible that these predators lived in small groups. It's a stretch to call Innistronyvia's hunt for Scutosaurus a battle. The fact is that the animals of the Permian period were quite slow. Gorgonopsians, of course, as befits active predators, moved a little faster than their prey, but their movement can hardly be called very fast either. Most likely, Innistronyavia approached a Scutosaurus peacefully grazing near a pond or in shallow water and inflicted a serious wound. The Scutosaurus began to slowly move away from danger, losing a lot of blood and receiving new wounds. Then the victim lost strength and could no longer resist. Then the predator could calmly finish it off and eat it. The Permian extinction put an end to this round of the arms race in the animal world. In many characteristics, late therapsids were close to mammals. They were already covered in fur. They also developed a way of feeding their young with milk through glands on the skin. Such a mechanism is now found in primitive mammals, such as the platypus. Further development of these animals could have led to more vivid and dramatic confrontations between predators and their victims. If not for another catastrophe of a planetary scale, neither dinosaurs nor especially mammals would have had any chance of dominance. But the history of life on the planet took such a path that the heroes of the most vivid confrontations in the animal world were not the rhapsids, but reptiles and then mammals. We'll talk about these battles in the next episodes. And the fauna of the Permian period simply set the general trends for the development of such confrontations, giving scientists and science lovers around the world a huge amount of material for studying the evolution of species. We thank everyone who watched this episode all the way to the end. You can find out more info about the animals of the Permian period and other eras better from previous videos of our channel. They also talk about the evolution of different species of living beings, the development of human society, and its relationship with wildlife. See you in the next video.